So attendees are just coming through now. So we went up while we were chatting to 43 attendees for today, which is amazing. So they're all just coming on now. Once we've got them on, we'll make a start on this cold and wet day in Salford, and I'm guessing it's wet down there as well, is it, Alison?
It is, yes. It's wet Wales. Yeah, but it's very beautiful as well, so no problem.
Yeah, and much needed, because we have, considering we're up in Salford, which is renowned for the weather, we haven't had hardly any rain, so definitely needed. So it's 26 people now. Let's give them another minute and then we'll make a start.
Come on, Paul, get a move on.
I've just muted him because they're walking up the stairs. He'll have an Irish coffee on in a minute. Okay, I think, should we make a start? We've got 28 people with us now, so I think we might go for it. Just unmute Paul.
Got a message from somebody on.
Oh, here we go. Oh, well, Carol Butler, she says, I can see 4 people on the screen, but not you. Yeah, sorry, Carol, it's a Zoom webinar, so you don't see yourself. You just see the people presenting. So it's a little bit different to a Zoom meeting. So yeah, don't worry, you won't see yourself, so that's absolutely normal. And it's actually a bonus, because then it doesn't matter if you've done your hair, if you haven't done your hair, if you've got a COVID hairstyle or not, it doesn't really matter. So we've got 20 people with us, so I'll make a start and hopefully the rest will join. So welcome to A Conversation With. This is our 4th online seminar. My name's Emma Smith. I'm the project manager for Empowered Conversations, which is a project of 6 degrees. We've got Alison Wray, who's a research professor in language and communication at the University of Cardiff. Anna Kwartz, who's a family carer. Phil McEvoy, who is the managing director for 6 Degrees Social Enterprise in Salford. And we've got Paul Earl. At some point will come on and we'll see his face. Let's start his video. And Paul is a facilitator with Empowered Conversations. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of a plan for today. For anybody that doesn't know us, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Empowered Conversations, but it will be very brief. I'm then going to pass over to Alison, who is going to do her presentation. That'll be about half an hour, and then we'll have a panel discussion, and we'll finish with our favourite bit. Sorry, Alison, but the Q&A at the end is possibly the favourite bit, because it's really where we get to have a chat with everyone and find out what's going on for people and how they've enjoyed the presentation and what their thoughts are. So on that, if you have any questions at any time, we won't answer them till the end, but just so you don't forget them, you can go into the Q&A at the bottom and just type your question in there. And that'll just sort of keep that fresh in your mind. Okay, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Empowered Conversations. So we've been going for the last 3 years, we've been out delivering communication courses to family carers across Greater Manchester in a range of different venues. For the last 1.5 years, we've also had Empowered Carers join us, which is offering one-to-one online support for carers in Salford. And collectively, the 2 projects have been delivering some online work during COVID. So we've got online groups for carers in Salford. We've got a disco, we've got Pause to Draw, we've got Come and Sing. We've got a load of different groups just to give carers and people with dementia something in the daytime where they can interact with other people and just have a bit of an escape, which I think is important for all of us. Okay, that's it. I told you it was going to be brief. I'm going to hand over to Alison, who's going to start her presentation.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm now going to attempt to share my screen in the appropriate way. There we are. Okay, so I hope that looks like you can just see my slides. Does that sound right? Yep, cool. Good. Okay, so what I want to cover today are three main topics, which will meld one into another. I'm going to start off with just a general introduction about the challenges of communication when someone's living with a dementia. But then I want to dig down into that and try and understand how communication works, because until we can understand what's going on beneath the surface, it's very difficult to understand why things go wrong in communication. And if we don't understand why they go wrong, it's difficult to understand how we might fix them. So I want to take us through those different stages. And the first thing I'm going to do is to show you just 6 minutes from one of the animated films that I've made. The YouTube address is written down there if you want to copy it down, but you can also find this by going onto YouTube or onto Google actually, and just putting in my surname, W-R-A-Y, and dementia and Robinson, because of Tony Robinson who narrates it, and that should bring up either this film or the other film that's available, and then from one you can get to the other. So I'm just going to show you the first 6 minutes or so of what is in fact an 18-minute film, just to sort of set the scene for us.
Imagine you found yourself in a foreign country. You don't know the language or the customs, and people keep telling you to do things and asking you things. You don't know what they want, you feel trapped and frightened, there's no one you can ask, no one you can talk to. You're feeling homesick, but you don't know how to get back to the places you know. A person with dementia can feel like this. Because they can't always lay down memories of recent events, they don't recall things as reliably as people expect them to. As a result, they often find they're asked things and told things that don't make sense to them. Someone might ask them what they had for lunch today. It seems like a simple question. But a person with dementia may not know what they had for lunch. They may not even know whether they've had lunch yet. Failing to store new information reliably can make apparently simple questions impossible to answer, and the situation easily becomes frightening and difficult to manage. In this film, we'll explore how communication can get disrupted in the context of dementia and why. And we'll consider some ways to help both you and the person with dementia get your messages across. When we communicate with others, we have an idea in our mind that we want to express. But a person with dementia can have difficulties seeing that process through. For example, they may have trouble getting their thoughts together, or they may struggle to put their idea into words. These problems can leave you unsure what they meant. Another difficulty they can have is understanding what other people are saying. And depending on how they respond to what you said, you might not be sure whether they understood you or not. It's easy for confusion to lead to frustration, and frustration can upset the relationship. Everyone finds it difficult to cope with not being understood. There are several different aspects to communicating successfully, and problems can arise with any one of them. The first thing we have to recognise is that communication sometimes gets difficult for reasons that aren't to do with the person's dementia at all. For example, if the person doesn't seem to have understood you, it might be that they just didn't hear what you said. If they don't have good hearing, do they have hearing aids they should be wearing? Position yourself where they can see your mouth, because lip reading is a useful backup that the hard of hearing often use. And if they are lip reading, make sure they have their glasses. Also, bear in mind that we all take a moment to tune in, so it's a good idea not to begin straight in with the important message. Use a phrase that gets their attention first. The second thing is that many older people experience some difficulty finding words, and that problem is often more severe in people with dementia. Not finding words can make it difficult to speak fluently. As the person tries to keep the conversation going, they might use a vague general word like thing, or choose a word that isn't quite the one they needed. Words are organised into groups by meaning and sound, and if the wrong one comes out, it's not likely to be a random choice. It's important to be patient and look for clues in the words used. What did they mean to say? Thirdly, most people with dementia have problems storing information about recent events. If they have no record of what has just occurred or what has just been said, then what happens next won't make much sense to them. They may need to ask questions so they can understand what's going on. Even when they have a partial record of what happened, they may feel insecure because they're not sure they've got all the information they need. It can be annoying when a person with dementia asks questions that you think they should know the answer to, but if they keep asking, then there's obviously something they still need to know. Keep in mind that the person is trying to make sense of their world. Try to read between the lines to work out if some confusion or anxiety lies behind what they're saying. Then find a way to provide the missing information in a helpful, non-confrontational way. Problems with conversation can also arise if the person with dementia hasn't been able to store information about who they're talking to or why they're having the conversation. We talk differently to different people, and if we're not sure who they are, we can't choose the right level of formality or tell them the appropriate information. What you wear and carry and what you say can give them hints about who you are and what your role is. That will help them place you and work out what they should be saying to you. All these challenges, not hearing well, not having enough information about recent events, and not being sure who's who, can happen in combination, and then things will easily get very confusing for both of you. Try.
Okay. Okay, so no, I don't want to combat that. I want to reshare. I'm losing the plot here. I hope the audio was all right on that for everyone. Yeah, we might want to mute other people. I don't know, Emma.
It was okay for me, and I guess if people struggled a little bit with the audio, then we can get them to go onto YouTube at a later date and.
Yeah. Okay, right. I'll carry on because I just lost the plot. I've got more to say. Okay, so we've got somebody who's raised their hand, Emma.
Barbara said the sound was absolutely fine.
Fantastic, that's lovely. Okay, I'll just carry on from there. You can see the screen now, can you? Okay, so just to summarize, what we've got there then is that communication is disrupted by various limitations in language and recall. So we saw it can be not seeing and hearing things adequately, not finding the right word in time, and sometimes replacing the word with an unexpected alternative, which just throws the other person. They're not quite sure what's being said. Not reliably storing information about recent events. And we tend to think about that in terms of Alzheimer's, where there are specific difficulties with event memory, so remembering things that happened recently. But it can also happen with other kinds of dementia too, just because there's an awful lot of processing has to go on, and a person living with a dementia may find their processing is slowed down a bit. And so if information is coming very fast at them from all different directions, it's very hard to keep up with everything. So that's another reason why not all the information might get stored. And then finally, we saw not being sure who they're talking to and why. But there's an interesting puzzle here, because these are all obviously tricky things, but what we might have thought was that all that would do would cause a bit of confusion. And if it's just confusion, it ought to be fairly easy to sort out. Just say, oh, that was a bit of strangeness, let's just sort it out. But that's not what happens. What tends to happen is that people get frustrated, they get angry, they get fed up, and so on. And it's that I've been really interested in my research. Why does that happen? Why is it that it's so easy for these very negative emotions to come out from the difficulties with communication. And in order to answer that question, we have to take a step back and ask how communication works. And so if we think of each individual person as living in a sort of a bubble, their own world, and my world is everything I can see, hear, touch, smell, whatever else, run out of senses, and everything I know, everything I can remember, everything I want, everything I believe, and so on. It's my whole world, everything I possess, and so on. That's my world. And of course, everybody's world is a bit different. We all live in different places. We do different things. We believe different things. We know different people. We want different things. Now, what's happening is that everybody's world is changing all the time. Even if we don't try to change it, it will change all on its own. So, for example, if I'm watching a TV program, then at that moment, my world's great because I'm watching this program, and the TV is on the right channel and so on. And then the TV program ends, and suddenly the next programmer wants on another channel. So now my TV's on the wrong channel when it wasn't before, but now it is, because the world has changed around me, if you like. And this happens all the time. Every time somebody speaks to me, every time I do something, I change my world. I think, I'm a bit thirsty, I could do with a cup of tea. My world would be better if I had a cup of tea. I go and make one. Now my world isn't wrong in that way. And so it's always changing. So what we're doing all the time is we're just noticing to what extent our world is optimal, and whether there's something in our world that we would really, really like to change. And all the time we're finding little things that are just not quite right in our world that we'd like to alter. So let's just take one very simple example. Let's imagine that the door's open and I'm getting cold, there's a draft. So what I would like to do is improve my world to be one in which the door isn't open, so I'm not getting cold. Now, the first thing I might think of doing is change that for myself. I'll stand up, go and close the door, problem over. And that's of course what we very often do. But what I'm interested in today, because it's about communication, is when for whatever reason we can't make that change for ourselves, and therefore we've got to find an alternative way to get that change to happen. And we're going to enlist the help of somebody else. And so we start to think, well, what have I got to achieve if I want to have the door shut and not be cold anymore? Well, right now, what I've got to do is get you to close the door for me. Okay, so that's what I want to achieve. How am I going to do that? Well, there are lots of ways it could be done, but we're talking about spoken communication at the moment. So in this occasion, we're going to say, I'm going to come up with a spoken message. So somehow I've got to say something to you that's going to persuade you to go and do me a favor and close that door because I'm cold. There's not necessarily much in it for you, so I've got to find a way to persuade you to do that. And so we've got this kind of circle, this cycle of something I want to improve. I've got to get you to approve. That's what I want to achieve. And so I need a spoken message to do that. So the question is, how am I going to construct that spoken message? And there are three components that we have to think about in getting towards producing that message. And the first one, which turns out to be the most important one, the one we're going to focus on, is what I need to take into account in terms of the context. So let's imagine that I'm going to ask you to close the door for me. What do I need to know about you? Let's imagine that you are a very busy person. You're rushing around. You're hard of hearing. You've only just sat down from doing something else, and I don't know you very well. Now, on the basis of those bits of information that I know about you, that's going to shape what I do next, which is to go into my toolbox of resources for language and pull out the words and grammar and intonation that I need in order to get you to do the thing that I want. And so I might be pulling out things like sorry, that's a useful word in this context. Would you mind is a useful phrase I might use here. Inconvenience is a nice word, that might sound good. And I'm going to be choosing to speak in a clear and loud way because you're hard of hearing and you're busy, so I've got to sort of interrupt what you're doing. And I'm also going to be friendly because you just sat down and you really don't want to stand up again, and I don't know you very well. And so I'm making choices on that basis. And then the final thing I need to do is put it all together as physical acts of speech. So I'm going to string some sounds together, and I'm going to come out with something like, I'm so sorry for the inconvenience, but would you mind closing the door? I'd be so grateful. Thank you so much. Completely over the top, of course. But the point is, in this particular instance, in that context, that might be, by your judgment, the optimal way to get the person to do what you want them to do, to make that change to your world. And it's down to the context. And we can see that very easily by changing the context. So let's go back and we'll say, the door's still open, I'm still cold, I still want you to close it for me. But now when I go and look at the context component, I get different information. So this time, you're a child, it's the third time you've left the door open, and you've been asked before. Now, immediately you can say, yeah, that's going to produce a very, very different kind of bit of speech in order to achieve the same effect. So now when I go to my words and my grammar and my intonation, I'm going to pull out different things. I'm going to use words like tell you and shut and maybe an expletive. I'm going to be loud, I'm going to be angry, I'm going to be authoritative, because that's what you do with little kids. I'm going to string those words together, will you shut, whatever, and it's going to be, will you shut the blasted door? I won't tell you again, or whatever it might be. Now, there's virtually no words in common between those two statements. You and door is about where it is, I think. Everything else is different. Yet it's still a spoken message to get that change to happen. And so it's quite clearly the context that shapes how we address people. And this is absolutely vital for now going on to figure out what it is that goes wrong when a person's living with a dementia. So when we look at the vital role of context, we realize that if you want to get somebody to do something to improve your world, you've got to know a whole load of stuff. You've got to know what they're able to do. There's no point asking a 3-month-old to close the door for you, because they're not physically able to do that. You've got to think what it's reasonable to get them to do. So if the Queen walks through and leaves the door open, I might think, actually, it's not all that reasonable to ask the Queen to close the door for me. I'll find a different way to sort that out. We've got to think about who they are relative to who we are to decide how polite or not we're going to be. So with children, we tend to be quite authoritative and a bit gruff, not all that polite very often. We've got to figure out where all this is happening. So how I get the door closed in my own living room may be very different from how I get the door closed if I'm in a church in the middle of a funeral, for example. It's a different context, and I'm going to have to take different things into account. What else is going on at the time? If there's a massive medical emergency going on around me, it might not be a good idea to tap a fireman on the shoulder and say, go and close the door for me, because that might not be the most important thing for them. So I'm going to have to figure out a different way to get the change I want. We've got to see who else is present, because they're listening to what I say, and they're going to make judgments about me that I might not want. So for example, if I'm going to tell that child off, is the child's parent there? Because parents very often get cross when somebody else tells their child off. So I might think, well, okay, I'm just not going to be that rude to that child because I don't want to upset the parent. You've got to think about what's previously happened. So suppose just a few minutes ago, somebody else asked if somebody would open the door because they were too hot. That makes a difference to how you're going to frame now asking for the door to be shut because you're too cold, because you don't know how the other person feels about that, and so on. And you've also got to think about what the person you're talking to knows about all of those things, but particularly what's previously happened. So what do you need to mention to them? What will they already know? So what information do you share and what information do you not share? So to just kind of consolidate that, I want to just show one more minute from the same film. It comes a little bit later in the film, and it will just back up on that a little bit.
Communicating effectively is complicated for all of us. Even when a speaker doesn't have any problems with turning an idea into words, and even when a hearer doesn't have any problems with understanding someone's words, it's not guaranteed that what the hearer understands will be identical to what the speaker intended. That's because we all know different things and see the world in different ways. A major part of successful communication is knowing where our knowledge overlaps with other people's knowledge. When you're talking to a person with dementia, you can't easily guess what they know because they're not storing all the information. And because they don't have full confidence about what they know, they'll find it hard to guess what you know. That means they may tell you things you already knew or ask you for information you've already given them.
Great. Okay. So, why does communication go wrong? Well, we've seen that it's because there are difficulties with the language, finding the right words, putting them all together, with memory, and with general processing, keeping up with what's going on. And jointly, what they do is they make it hard to keep track of the context. So what happens is that there's a problem with understanding and conceptualizing and joining up for the speaker and the hearer what each of them knows and what they both know. So that becomes very unstable. I'm not sure what you know, and I'm not sure what you think I know, and I'm not sure what I can assume we both know. And what that means is that neither party in the conversation, because this is really about both people struggling with the communication, neither party is sure what the other person does and doesn't know already, or what knowledge it's safe to assume that they don't need to repeat. And that is very disconcerting for both people. And it creates a context in which conversation just feels a bit awkward and a bit risky and a bit uncomfortable. And it doesn't take long for that to start to leak into sort of negative emotions. So let's think about where we are with a person living with dementia who could have one or more of these problems, that they don't know right now who it is they're talking with. They maybe were introduced and they've forgotten. It's just they can't recall what they were told. They're not quite sure why they're having this conversation. So what the purpose of the conversation is, what is it you want me to say? They're not quite sure where they are. Maybe they could be in one place or another and they're not quite sure which one it is. They're not quite sure what's going on around them. They're not sure what's possible in this situation when they want to change things in their world. And they're not quite sure what's already happened. Any one of these can cause a difficulty. More than one of them is definitely going to cause a difficulty. So what that means is that then when they try to make changes to their world by asking somebody else to do something for them or saying something that will get somebody to act on their behalf, they're at huge risk of addressing that person inappropriately, of saying something that's inappropriate for the context, saying something that doesn't make sense in the context from the other person's point of view, trying to change something in their world that isn't deliverable. For example, if they have a sense that they're in the world of 50 years ago or 70 years ago, they may say, oh, I want to go home to my family, where that's just not the world that they're in now. Or they could be failing to take into account previous events and conversations, and so the other person is left at sixes and sevens about why they're saying it that way. Now, what that means is that as a result, the hearer may respond in a way they weren't expecting. The hearer just might be confused about what they've said, or offended by something they've said, or annoyed or frustrated. And this is really puzzling. If you think that you've put together a perfectly comprehensible message, and then somebody replies in that kind of way, that shows, responds in that kind of way, it's really disconcerting. And as a result, it's quite likely that a person living with a dementia who just tries to get something, little thing changed in their world through the agency of somebody else, ends up feeling undermined or embarrassed or mortified or disappointed or frustrated or disempowered. All of these very negative things that they weren't really anticipating were going to happen when they opened their mouth and said something. So how are they likely to respond when they keep finding themselves in that kind of situation? So here's a few things that might happen. How the person living with the dementia might respond and how the other person might respond to that. First of all, if they really wanted to make that change in their world and the other person just seems to be getting in their way because they can't understand or they disagree about what's possible, they might just fight for their need. They say, no, I definitely want that thing to happen. I'm definitely trying to get this change. So they argue. They get defensive when the person says it's not possible. They say, yes, of course it is. Maybe they get aggressive about it because they're so frustrated. As a result, the other person might get upset, the other might get annoyed. They might become physically forceful about restraining them from the thing that they're trying to do. They also might label them as disruptive and awkward. And this is a massive risk for people who are simply just trying to make a little change to their world, and they can't understand why it's such a problem. Another thing that can happen is that over time they start to realize that it's undermining the relationship. So every time I just try to say something to my daughter, who I love dearly, and I really rely on her to support me and look after me, but I keep upsetting her and I keep annoying her, and I don't want to do that. And so what I'm going to do is just say yes to everything. When she says, do you want tea or coffee? Well, I tried saying, oh, I'd love a cup of coffee. And she kind of went, oh, all right, then, if you must have coffee. What? You asked me what I wanted. I just told you. Why was that a problem? I don't understand. Okay, I don't want that to happen. So now on, when you say, do you want tea or coffee? I'm going to say, what are you having? And I'm just going to have the same. And that's a way of suppressing your own real desires for how you want to change your world. But you do that because there's something else that's more important to you. You don't want to wreck your world with relation to your in your relationships. So what can happen then is the other person starts to assume that they have no preferences, which isn't actually true. It's just that they are choosing not to express them. They may also not understand why the person never seems truly happy, because their world is just full of things that aren't quite right, but they now feel that they're not in a position to try and change their world for the better. Now, the third thing that can happen is those very negative feelings start to just feel horrible. And so the person living with the dementia decides that they just want to protect themselves from the risk of feeling all of those things. And so they just go quiet. So they don't try to change their world. They don't say anything either way. And the risk there then is that the other person assumes they can't communicate. And this happens in care homes, I think, quite a lot. Assumes they can't communicate when that's not actually necessarily the case, and assumes that they don't want or need anything, and that's also not the case. It's just that they are trying to pull their horns in, and they're not communicating because it's too stressful and it's too painful when it goes wrong. So what's the solution? Well, there are lots of potential solutions. I can't go through them all now for obvious reasons, but what I have done is just to put together a few fixes, as I call them. Now, these are things you may well have heard about before, and that's quite right, because there's a lot of good stuff out there. But what I want to do with each one is just explain why, in the context of what I've been talking about, why that's important to do. So we'll start off with language-related fixes. Now, it's very often said that it's a good idea to speak more slowly and more simply to a person living with a dementia, and that's really, really good advice. But why? Well, the reason is because if you can speak a bit more slowly and a bit more simply, it helps the person take the information in. And that helps them to build up that sense of the context that is relevant to what you're talking about. And if once they have more context, they're more likely to keep up and be able to fill in any gaps that arise. There's a lot of stuff out there about whether or not it's okay to ask questions of people living with a dementia. And I've written about this quite a lot because I think it's too simplistic to say don't ask questions. That simply isn't helpful very often. But be aware that sometimes questions that rely on contextual knowledge could be difficult. Why? Because if you happen not to be carrying that context in your mind at that time, even a very easy question is hard to answer. So somebody says, did you enjoy yourself this morning? And the person can't recall what it was they did this morning. They can say yes, thank you, but they don't really know what they're answering to. So these questions whereas if you can build the context in, did you enjoy going out to the garden centre this morning? You're giving them much more of a chance to be able to answer something that's relevant. Restating who and what you're talking about regularly. So obviously we get into saying things like he after a while. Well, just restate that you're talking about John. Instead of saying there, say the wedding. And if you just do that a little bit more often, that will help because you're supplying the context again. And if the person happens to have got lost with regard to what was being talked about or who was being talked about. You're giving them a pointer back into it so that they can then participate a little bit more and they're not getting further and further behind. Credibility fixes. This is about always assuming that the purpose of the utterance is to get you to change something in the person's world. Now, it might be a physical action, it might be giving information, it might be receiving information, giving comfort, receiving comfort, or lots of other things, but assuming that there is a purpose to it. Because if you always assume that, then whatever they say, the first thing you'll think is, what did you say this for? And when you respond, you'll be aiming to try and fulfill their need, and you're less likely to sort of say, oh, you were just talking, that didn't have any purpose at all. We don't tend to talk with no purpose at all. There's usually some sort of purpose to it, even if it's just to be heard. Always assume that there's a meaning of some kind. So don't assume that somebody is just talking nonsense or saying something that's unimportant. Why? Because even if you can't work out their meaning, and sometimes you won't be able to work out what they meant, the person will still feel that you're taking them seriously as a human being, which is really, really important for somebody who consistently finds that people find it hard to understand what they mean. Reading between the lines. Use the context that you're in to try and figure out what the purpose of the utterance might be. Because something that's nonsensical when you first hear it may make perfect sense if you can realize from the context that what's happened is a word that's been replaced. So there's a book I just finished reading by Val Ormrod called In My Father's Memory, and it's about her looking after her dad with dementia. And one of the things that he would do was he would use the word sausages as a replacement word when he couldn't think of a word. And one morning when he was getting up, he said, I can't find my sausages. But because she knew that they were in the process of getting him up, and one of the things that he liked to do was shave, she was able to figure out that what he meant was he couldn't find his razor. And that was because she was using the context. And the other thing is to think about other possible contexts the person might have been drawing on that they haven't let you in on. It's a context in their mind, or they've made an association. So they may have mistaken the context that you're in, but you can figure out how, or they may have switched the topic and not told you. But if you're just aware that they may have jumped context, then suddenly, if you can get the right context, all of that information may suddenly just fall into place and you can see what they mean. And finally, this is about oneself. Think about things differently. If you're getting frustrated in conversations with a person living with a dementia, then you need to notice that you are. That's the first step. Firstly, because it's perfectly natural, and you mustn't beat yourself up for it, but it's obviously not very helpful. And until you notice it and acknowledge it, it's very difficult to deal with. You've got to think about what changes you're trying to achieve in your world and not succeeding with. You're in interaction with this person and you're probably trying to get them to respond to things, and that's not working. So if you can be aware of what it was you were trying to achieve and acknowledge that that's not working, then you can start to wonder whether, well, was that reasonable to expect that person to help me with that? Was it doable for them? Do I really need that change? Is there some other way that I could get it? Come in fresh each time. Don't carry too many negative assumptions with you, because dementia symptoms can vary from moment to moment, from day to day. So if something didn't work yesterday, then it might work today, and it's worth a try. And finally, be kind to yourself and to everyone else. Why? Because it helps others cope when you're kind to them, and because it feeds you with power and with positivity. Okay, so that's what I wanted to say. Just a quick plug for my book, because I have to do this. This book is it's coming out officially on the 25th of June, and it goes through all of this stuff in far too much detail. It's an academic book, but it does have all this stuff in. I am writing another book at the moment, which is aimed more for people who don't want 10 references for every claim. So that I'm working on that at the moment. And I've just put the YouTube address there at the bottom again of the film that we've already seen, in case you didn't pick it up. Okay, so that's that. So I'm going to stop sharing now so that we can get into a bit of discussion. Thanks very much for listening.
That was brilliant, Alison. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
And what I didn't say at the beginning on the introduction is that when we deliver the Empowered Conversations courses, we use Alison's animations throughout. So I know, Paul, that probably felt really familiar, and Annie, and well, all of us, we've watched them so many times. So it feels like very familiar ground for us. So that's the connection between Empowered and Alison, is that we've been sort of buddies for a few years now, and then over the last year we've been getting a bit tighter and doing a bit more together. So thank you for that. So I'm going to hand over to Anna, Phil, Paul for your thoughts on what Alison's just said, please. And then I'm also going to remind everybody at home or in the office or wherever you are, if you've got any questions, if you start putting them in the Q&A, then in about five or so minutes we'll start looking at those questions and starting a conversation around those.
Okay, I've got a question for Alison.
Yeah.
So thanks for the presentation. I'm feeling the power and the positivity, especially from the communicative fixes. I thought at the end, I think it's like kind of there's a great load of things that kind of really important to hold on to, and it helps you to hold on to something when you know the purpose behind it.
Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah. I thought it's one of the in your writings you've written a lot about a lady who was an opera singer who had dementia, who was able to kind of carry on teaching other people. And I just wonder if you could just give an example from your work with that lady that like kind of explained the meaning or some of the concepts.
Yeah, sure. So this was a rather famous international opera singer whose name I've never used in public, and I rename her as Joan, which means it isn't Joan Sutherland, as some people have thought it was, but it was a well-known opera singer who, a lot of opera singers, when they retire, they're already teaching. You come off the stage, but you've got singing pupils, and you carry on with them, and you also run workshops and this was one where people came for a weekend to a particular study centre, and they would sit, there were solo singers, there were amateurs, and they would stand up and sing a song, and then the tutor would give them feedback on how to improve their singing. So it's like a masterclass kind of thing. And this lady, Joan, had really quite marked symptoms of Alzheimer's, but she was the tutor on this course. And what was really extraordinary was how incredibly empowering it was for her to be in a situation where she was in charge and she had got credibility and people had paid good money to get information from her. So there was a marked contrast. When we were sitting around having meals, her husband was with her, and if anybody asked a question or said, will you pass the salt or something like that, she would defer to him, and she was really quite confused. And the things she said seemed quite muddled. As soon as she got into the context that she was familiar with, where she was teaching, singing, my goodness, you couldn't stop her. She had a lot of difficulties finding words, and but she's managed somehow to make meaning. And part of the point of that, the reason she could do that was because everybody else was trying to help her make meaning. They believed, they gave her high credibility. They believed that she had things that she wanted to say, and they wanted to hear them. There was a very strong sense of, you know, my world is one in which I want to know how to sing this song better, and the way I'm going to get to know that is by you telling me stuff. So I'm jolly well going to help you tell me, even if you're struggling with a few words. And it was a very, very unusual situation because of this huge energy that she was able to bring to that, precisely because she was given that role, in my view.
Can I mention something there? What you've just said has absolutely brought something to life for me. My mum's living with pretty advanced now frontotemporal dementia, and she's not particularly verbal these days, but earlier on in her condition, if I was struggling to make a conversation with her or make a conversation flow, I would often ask her to teach me something or tell me how to do something. but she was a teacher. She'd been a teacher her whole life. And it wasn't just a job for her. My mum was an incredibly natural teacher, and it totally and utterly defined who she was. She was a passionate and very, very natural teacher. It was through her, like you know, sort of writing through Blackpool Rock. And you know, if we were struggling to have a chat, I'd say, you know, you know, Mum, I can't think, I don't know what to give the kids for supper tonight. I might make bolognese. How do you do that, or something like that? And you know, even if the answer was a bit muddled, she would absolutely come to life in teaching me something, whatever it happens to be. And that, so it really chimes with what you've just said as a completely different form of communication.
For me, it's always the opening part of the first video you started. Imagine yourself living in a foreign country. You know, that, you know, you're in the middle of rural Spain or France, you know, you puncture in the car, you know, you might speak a little bit of the local language, you know, and trying to get over, you know, what you need, the person you're talking to doesn't understand, you know, and imagining that situation and then thinking, okay, the person living with dementia is also in that point, just sort of always resonates, you know, whenever we show that little bit of the video, you know, it's like, it hits, it's like been hit with a hammer every single time. I really liked as well the way that you started to talk about solutions to the communication problem, because that's something we started to introduce into the course. We've recently gone from a 4-week to a 6-week course and starting to look at a little bit of problem solving. So that was really interesting, actually. It sort of made me go away and think, conversations I might have with Emma at a later date.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. I think this is really important that I've thought a lot about, there are many ideas and solutions out there, and a lot of them are very good, but the difficulty can be that if you simply say, as you find in some places on websites, it will say, remember these 3 things, and if you do this, this, and this, then it's all sorted. And people are, great, fantastic, I've now got the answer. And you go out and try it, and it doesn't work. And then they're saying, well, that's a load of rubbish then, isn't it? And I'm not going to try that again. And the reason is because when something doesn't work, you've got to understand why. You've got to understand why it was a good thing to try and why it might not work. So, and that empowers you, because then you've got the imagination. You can take the imagination with you, and it makes it much more of you're much more of a detective in all of this. You know, that could work. So why didn't that work this time? What could be going on? And it gives you much more of an investment of feeling that you can figure things out and be part of a way of finding your own solutions, which is in the end what everybody's got to do. Nobody can really tell you what's going to work in your particular situation on a particular day, because everything's different. We've got to empower people to have the confidence to try something for a good reason, and then see how that works and be curious about it, and continue to develop a sort of a deeper understanding of what the mechanisms are, because that's how they're going to see what the person living with a dementia can still do, which is really, it's so important to bring that out somehow, to maximize their capacity to communicate rather than minimizing it, which is what can often happen.
That not giving up just because it didn't work yesterday, it might not, it might work today, you know, and it might not have worked yesterday and the day before and the day before and the day before, and then eventually you can be very easily become blasé. Oh, there's no point trying that. It's never going to work. And so, you know, not giving up on the person with dementia, but not giving up on yourself and trying to sort of make a difference.
And I think that's certainly what we talk about on the course, is curiosity. So we just, every session was sort of giving people that time to pause and reflect on how they communicate, and being curious, so that they start to come up with their own fixes. Because we know that you can read a list of things, but it won't stick in there unless you start trying it, having that confidence to try it. And the more you try and share, the more, you know, confidence you have in doing something totally different that you would never have done before. And then suddenly, you know, you found a different way to communicate that's working for you at that time. Barbara, I know, I just wanted to say this, Barbara had put in, I also did this with my mum, who was a teacher. She taught my sister-in-law to knit, even in the very advanced stages. And Barbara's one of our lovely facilitators as well. So just wanted to share that. We've only had 2 questions. They're being very quiet. I don't know what's going on. I don't know if it's the weather or what, but anyway, we've got our first question. So I'm going to read this out, and I'm going to challenge you all to put some more questions on there. So this is from Martin, who, and Alison, we met Martin on the first one. He was on the panel with us. He says, my wife has advanced Lewy body dementia, and for much of the time her conversations do not make much sense. I try and guess what she means and answer accordingly, or sometimes I just say, yes, did they, that's right. Am I being too dismissive, or should I question her more to better understand what she's trying to say?
Oh, got a helicopter going over. This is a really difficult one, because dementia really does disrupt communication, and it disrupts thought, and no amount of being patient and asking questions is necessarily going to solve all of that. It's not like you can scrape away all of that stuff and underneath there's necessarily going to be something that's comprehensible. I suppose what it comes down to is, how does she respond? Are you able to give her something that is improving her world by the things that you're saying? So if she's getting frustrated because when you respond in that way, that's really just not enough, that's not enabling her to make a change to her world that she wants, then that would be the time to try and dig a bit deeper. If you can use a lot of context to try and figure out what it might be. But if she's talking and she seems quite content to talk and have you respond in that kind of way, the thing she wants to change in her world might simply be to know that you're there and know that you're responding to her. And therefore you fulfilled that if you respond in that way. The key thing is to try and not do it too dismissively, you know, the kind of way when you're watching TV and somebody comes in and starts talking, you're saying, oh really, oh yeah, and you're actually not taking in anything at all. Giving the person attention and making them feel valued and important, even if you're not quite sure what they're trying to say, is very important, I think.
We had a carer on a course way back at the beginning of the 3 years ago, and her mum was in a care home, and she used the phrase, she said she would sieve. So she would listen to her mum's whole sentence, and she would really think about those words and sort of try and sieve out the one which maybe was the point that her mum was trying to get over. So I just really, I loved that, how she would sieve that, and you can only do that if you're in the moment with that person, because if you're busy like peeling your potatoes while you're having a chat, you're going to miss that. So, you know, if you've got the time just to slow it down and be in the moment with them, and then just have that awareness that maybe there's a word in there that will is what they're trying to say to you. So, and
particularly if it's clear that there's something that they need to convey to you, so that you will act in some sort of way. One of the great techniques that Stephen Sabat uses, and also Danuta Lipinska in her work with in psychotherapy with people living with dementia, is to turn it round and say, what I think you're saying to me is this, is that right? So that you give the person a chance to check whether you've understood correctly. Now, that's not going to work for everybody and at every stage of dementia, but it can be a way. You don't have to just sort of take what they say and take it in and try and figure out in your head and respond. You can actually feed back and say, I think what you might trying to say is this, is that right? And just see what happens with that, because that can be a way to open up that opportunity again.
If I can make a point there. And when my mum was living with the early and probably even into the moderate stages of her dementia, and I was her sole carer, but she was living alone and independently, I think I had sort of almost a sort of flow diagram in my mind of 2 sets of communication. One which was about anything to do with safety, and one was to do with about other communication. And if it was to do with safety, to do with hunger, thirst, pain, illness, medications, or anything where her safety was threatened, then I would probably start digging down and delving down and trying to investigate that issue further. Is this your pain in your tummy, whatever it happens, is it potentially serious and do we need to sort it out? And the other things, which are just perhaps general chit chat or, you know, just general sort of social things, then I would probably let sort of gloss over those, but I delved into the safety related ones, I suppose, more deeply.
Yeah, and that's very understandable, because everything is, you've got to manage this very, very difficult situation. If you're a carer, family carer particularly, who's there all the time, this is just massively stressful and time consuming. And you've just got to find a way to prioritize things in a way that makes sense to you. And even the fact of saying, this is what I'm doing, I'm going to prioritize safety, and with other things I'm not going to. And then you're in a position to say, oh, right now I've got a little bit of spare energy, I'm now going to prioritize one of those things I don't normally prioritize. But you're in charge. You're actually making decisions from a sort of a reflective perspective. You know, you're thinking about what's going on and making decisions about what you do. Whereas there's a real risk that the more stressed we get, the more we just kind of bat everything away and just trying to keep on top of things. And it's very overwhelming. So it's a way of taking charge a little bit more and looking after yourself a little bit more.
Okay, thanks everyone. They've been very quiet, so I should have said at the beginning, we've got a really nice mix of attendees today. I think we've got quite a lot of family carers, some people living with dementia, some professionals, and a smattering of academics in there. Oh, we've got an anonymous question. How does the Empowered Conversations course fit in with local speech and language therapy provision for communication interventions for people with dementia and their carers? I'm happy to talk about that. So we've been speaking to the local providers, so over here in Salford, so they're well aware of us and they do refer people onto the course. I suppose the difference around Empowered Conversations, it's not just about speech, it's a bit broader, so it's really giving carers time to pause and reflect and to think about their relationship and how they communicate. So it's not just thinking this is a conversation, it's thinking that wider, what's going on, how do people feel, you know, if a carer is a daughter or a wife and those relationships have changed, all of that will start to impact on how they have a conversation with their mom or their husband. And I guess that's where Empowered Conversations might differ a little bit to what SALT offer, but I think the two work really well hand in hand. And prior to COVID, we were planning to do some work together, so hopefully that will be picked up again in Salford.
We had a question there from Carol as well, didn't we? Did you see that, Emma?
I did. I think it was right at the beginning, and it was when you were using the analogy of the open door and being cold. But there was
I don't know the answer to that one, I'm afraid.
No, I think it was just yeah. I think maybe just as your analogy was building, then it became more obvious what you were saying. But Susan at the bottom said, "Oh, I've really enjoyed learning how to communicate better and love the analogy, Ari, a foreign language." So that was really nice. Thank you, Susan. Hopefully you'll go onto YouTube and watch the full animations. Yeah. And I should just do a little plug. So we're in our last 2 minutes now. So Paul will be delivering our first online Empowered Conversations course. It starts next Wednesday, and that's for any carers in Salford. So we're very excited about doing that. We've delivered the course online to professionals, but we haven't delivered it to family carers up until now. So that's happening. I'm just going to press the polls now. There we go. I'm launching the poll so you can tell us what you thought about today's session. I should say, when we started this back in March, we'd planned to do a conference. It didn't happen, and then we were like, okay, so what could we do? Maybe we could do some online seminars. So we sort of managed to cobble together 7, and we're like, well, this is our 4th one. We've increased that now, so we've got another 4 that are coming online in July. So we're really excited about that. I haven't got all of the details, but look out for those. So we're dead excited about that. Natalie Yates Bolton is who will be talking next week. She's from the University of Salford, and she's going to be looking at interactions, the smallest moments of connections, and she's going to be considering why the smallest moments of connections can be so important when connecting to somebody living with dementia. So that's that plugged. I don't think we've got any more questions. So Barbara's just said that. No, I think I've gone through everything that everybody said to us. I would just like to say thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you for attendees who have been really quiet. I need to know why you're so quiet. Send it in an email, what's going on. Are you eating your dinner or something? Something's happening. If you've enjoyed today, then please share it with other people who you think will benefit. We do tape all of these and we put them on YouTube. Apart from yours, Jack, sorry, it went wrong last week, but I'm sorry about that, but that's life and we have to move on. So we tape them, they go on YouTube. The first 2 that we've put out there, we've had another 100 viewers. So the reach for these seminars is actually much greater than the conference would have ever been. So there you go, maybe this is our future. So thanks everyone, I'm going to bring it to an end and give you all a little wave.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye, thank you. Bye.